Welcome to In a Nutshell, the podcast dedicated to all things agricultural consulting. I'm Dylan Brush here with soil genius and ag consultant Bill Brush, and we're delighted to accompany you on this journey where we break down the different aspects of agricultural consulting. In each episode, we'll dive into the realm of agriculture through the eyes of Bill Brush, where consultants like Bill play a vital role in empowering farmers, agribusiness, and agricultural organizations. If you're passionate about agriculture, problem solving, and enjoy a little bit of detective work, this podcast is tailor-made for you.
Hi, this is Bill Brush. Welcome back to In a Nutshell. Today just a series of, as we'll just mix and match in as we go forward with more podcasts, but we'll do a travel log here and there. Some interesting things about farming, some places I went, around the world with my consulting, some of the things I found, some of the things that were really interesting, and hopefully some fun facts about the places that I've been. So one of my most recent travels has been to country of Portugal. A real small country overall, right there sits on the Atlantic Ocean on the eastern side of it there, right, butts right up next to Spain. So a really, in its own way, a very beautiful country. And my job that I was sent there, tasked to do, was to go there and find out if the soils in Portugal, climate, the water, the weather, the ability to produce a real long season crop of almonds and scratch the almonds, to see if they would grow almonds in Portugal and be able to be a viable crop monetarily, not only for them, but also to be able to get the volume that you need to make a successful crop. So there's lots of things to look into that. When you look at a lot of it's looking at historical data on climate, and my knowledge of soils, to look at them as I dig down into these soils, excavate them. I had a large excavator that they drug around everywhere I went. We looked at the potential sites to look at, and we dug a lot of what we'll call soil pits. I'll get into that in just a moment. Also, we wanted to make sure they had plenty of water and a good, clean, quality source of water with not a lot of mineralization, so that we could control the environment with applying the water and not either damaging or not adding to our soils with things that we really didn't need. So as we started to look, the first thing that struck me is that looks a lot very similar to us area that I come from in California, central California. There's a rural town up in almost out into the foothills called Oakdale, and it has a lot of the same look of that. Rolling hills, a lot of dry grass, a lot of grazing land, a lot of livestock on it all the time, and over there, there's a lot of those places up and down the valley here of California. The Central Valley is the one I'm talking about. And it reminded me that then I needed to, which I researched. I went into library, looked at, got some English translated books, and for me, necessary. And then I looked at rainfall amounts and cold temperatures. And was there enough chilling hours for almonds? Was there going to be enough rainfall if we had some things we didn't like in the soil to be able to drive it through and move it through the soil to get it out of the growing zone? And so many of the soils that we found were not suitable. Very, very thick, heavy soils. Most all the soils were very low in nutrients. But one thing about being low in nutrients, you can add nutrients back in the form of soil amendments, fertilizers. There's a lot of livestock around, of cattle, sheep, and you can get a lot of these things worked into that and actually build up your cache of nutrients. One of the things you can't do is if you have too sandy a soil, you don't hold on to many nutrients because there's no clay as the storage unit to hold on to those nutrients. So if you don't have enough clay, it becomes very difficult. They can work very well, but one problem that you get with those light sandy soils is keeping them wet enough and keeping enough nutrients, because you have to literally almost feed them all the time. And because you have to feed them all the time, it gets very One, it gets costly because you have to add all the nutrients you're going to need almost. And then you also, the timing and getting it on the right time and making sure the plant gets everything it wants. But they are very, very uh, farmable that way. For almonds, we do a lot here in the Central Valley, so it didn't scare me away. They had a great uh, government projects where they put within collaboration with Spain, who allowed them to have this water. They put a dam in, and they made the Alceva reservoir, which is a huge reservoir that then they took and did a huge infrastructure problem to be able to pump this water from there and put it out and deliver it to the many growers of these different areas that have been proven to be good farm areas. And they basically just charged you for the water you use. And so it was really good. We tested the water, really good quality. And so my next thing was, okay, let's go find some soil that's going to be good. And we looked and we looked and we'd find one here, we'd find one there. But we had a monster excavator to dig these soil pits were, and they followed me around. We'd be on a several 100 acres of ground where we'd walk all over that. I dug over the years that I've been there thousands of pits, and they're somewhere around 3 to 4 feet wide and about 8 feet deep. And we would get down in there, and I'd see the ability to drain. Was there any impervious layer of rock or something like that that you couldn't break through? Was there a good topsoil, a good, we'll call horizon, the very top 3 to 5 inches? How nice and pliable what did it look like? And was water going to drain? Did they need to take a big track layer and basically rip the ground and basically break up any compaction there might be? So we looked around all over that central part of Portugal, from the town of Évora, somewhat north, but most of it south, and a lot of areas were more suitable for the type of soil and climate and everything that we needed. The crops they currently grow in Portugal today that I've seen around it, particularly in the area that I'm at, is almonds. Are now there's probably 50, 60,000 acres of almonds there now. A lot more of that of olives, and then a lot more, both of those, of grapes. A lot of wine grapes, of course. Anybody familiar with Portugal and has anything to ever had tried port wine, it basically originated in Portugal years ago. And what it is a stabilized wine of a higher proof, because when people were sailing ships years and centuries ago down that coastline, and they came across and they found some of these really good Portuguese wine, and what they didn't know was they would take a lot back to them by the time they got back to Europe. Weeks to months that it took to get back there, these had already spoiled and turned to vinegar. So what they began to do is fortify them so they were a higher proof alcohol, which then stabilized them. And then they were allowed to, when they got there, they were still good, and they got quite a reputation for producing that. So interesting story on how the port wine industry got developed. It's more the bigger part of the wine grape industry is up in the northern part, on the Douro Valley, and also around the town of Porto. Beautiful cities, and very, very interesting climates up there. Also, in addition to that, we have a lot of livestock, mostly sheep and cattle, that graze a lot of this open land. Never done anything to it, just using the natural rainfall. So normally the heavier, when I say heavier, those soils that have more clay in it would hold more water. So they would hold on to grass and keep it growing a lot longer. Whereas the sandier portions would, the sandier tracts of land would dry out very quickly, and then not be near as successful for grazing. But some of those, like in between those, is the kind of soils I was looking for, that had some clay, but a lot of sand to be able to get good drainage, which is what you would need for successful almond farming. It's a very, very old country. It's got a lot of old buildings. You see as you go around the countryside, you'll see a lot of stone buildings that have kind of crumbled down, but you'll also see some restored churches and cathedrals. Just very, very interesting. Cobblestone streets on a lot of the little towns. The town of Evora up on the mountain inside the wall, part of the city, all kind of. It's kind of funny to see cars going through this centuries old city of Evora, and but they have all cobblestone streets. It takes you back in time when you get into the smaller outlying little towns and hamlets around. It's really interesting to see the real narrow streets. Not a lot of big vehicles, but people walking. Very, very simple life. But it looks like you could go back centuries, and that's exactly the way it would be. Another unique thing that I found in Portugal, and it's the number one country in the world for exporting cork. Cork for primarily wine all over the world to different winemaking countries, including the U.S. And the way cork grows is kind of interesting. It's a cork oak, uh, one of the many types of oak trees. But that cork is the outside layer, and it takes quite a while, years, to get up to the point that it's about 3 inches thick. And then they come out and harvest. They literally cut down to that and peel it off. It makes these huge sheets, probably 4 to 6 feet long and about 18 inches across, where they lay them all, get them dried out, and then they send them off to the cork factory where they put them in and harvest the cork and actually make the cork. But in the meantime, that cork tree does not die. And instead, what they do is they put assign a number to it. So if you were harvesting it this year, you would put a 5 on it for 2025. And then you look throughout these same orchards of cork, and a lot of them are just natural stands of cork oak that have been there for a long, long time. And you'll see one that's got a 7. Well, that probably the one you're seeing there about a 7 would be from 2017, because it takes, as they get in that about a 7-year rotation, what you would see is they would then, it's harder and harder to see that where they've painted that, and then they're ready to harvest again. But it usually takes about 7 years to grow that bark back and form a cork to be able to harvest again. And they do these over and over again. The other thing, that it's such a big, important part of not only the Portuguese culture, but also of economic value, that the government basically forbids you to cut down a cork oak that's living, and if you have one that dies, you have to literally call out the officials. They look at your cork oak and establish that, yes, it is dead. And then you're able to go ahead and take it out. But they actually have some encouraging programs to have you take some of your ground. The government will pay you so much money to put in cork oaks and plant them and get them established. And then after a period of time, they're trying to grow. So, as some die off, there has to be some new ones planted, or pretty soon that industry will go away. I was very well taken care of. I had the Costa family, Jose, or as they call him in Portugal, Jose, and Darius, his son, were very, very great to me, hospitality wise. A lot of times took me into their own home, took care of me, fed me, and then I would help them with their own almond orchards as I could, as I was there, give them some tips on some things they were doing and thought they could improve on, and that kind of thing. So it's been a really great experience to meet a totally different culture in a very, very slow down pace, and very, very outwardly friendly people. So much to talk about, but yeah, it was one of my most recent, but also one that I've spent a lot of time on and have really, really enjoyed the experience while I've been in Portugal. So that's it for today on Portugal. What I'd like to do is continue on about every third or fourth episode, we'll talk about another corner of the world that I've been to, and in some cases, maybe here even in the U.S. if I've got an interesting place. So, till next time, thanks for listening and stay curious.
Thanks for another absolutely fantastic episode of Agriculture in a Nutshell, Bill. I'm sure that everyone listening very much so enjoyed what you had to say and share about your trips to Portugal. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and always stay curious.